If you're producing video content, you know that production quality matters. But we also know that most of the viewers on YouTube are not watching video at 4K. So that tells us that your audience will most likely accept less than perfect broadcast quality video. But that's not the case with audio. If the audio on your productions isn't on point, if it doesn't sound of a professional level of quality, that's going to impact your success. So I'm going to give you 10 tips on how you can level up the audio in your YouTube video productions. Tip number 1, you need a microphone. Well, that's a no-brainer. We need a microphone to pick up sound. And your camera already has a microphone, but it's not going to cut it. Now, the microphone that's on your camera may actually be a decent microphone, but chances are it's not going to be where it needs to be. Your camera has to be in a certain position in order to get good video, and that position is most likely not going to be the right place to put a microphone to get the best possible sound. So that means that you need an external microphone. And so the question is, what kind of microphone should you get? Well, first let's talk about the microphones you shouldn't get. Don't get a microphone that attaches to your camera. Like I just mentioned, the placement of your camera is probably not where you need to place the microphone, so putting a mic on the camera, that doesn't get you there. The second is don't get a shotgun microphone. I know, that guy in the other video just talked about how great shotgun microphones are, and if you go down to your camera store, that's probably what they're going to try to hand you is a shotgun microphone. And yeah, there are some Hollywood studio productions that use shotgun microphones. But a shotgun microphone is not the right tool for you. In a Hollywood production, they're using that microphone in a controlled space. And they're probably using that microphone on a pole with a boom operator who's making sure everything is just right for that production. Shotgun microphones do not work well in small, uncontrolled spaces. And that's where most of us are making our videos. And so it's just not the right tool. It's not going to yield the best result. So don't get a shotgun mic. The other kind of mic you shouldn't get is a large diaphragm studio condenser. These are those large microphones that you sometimes see people singing into in recording studios. They're mounted on a stand, usually with a shock mount, and they tend to be pretty expensive. And those microphones do a great job of picking up every little nuance in somebody's voice. They can make singers sound fantastic. And so you might think that a microphone that makes people's vocals sound fantastic would be the right microphone to make your voice sound fantastic. And those are really good mics. But they're not the right mic for you. Because those mics, in addition to making things sound pretty darn good, they also tend to pick up everything in the environment. And so you don't need a microphone that's going to also pick up your neighbor mowing the lawn, the trucks going by the house, other activities happening within the house, the heating cooling system turning on and off, all those background noises. Those type of microphones generally pick up a lot of background noise, and that is exactly not what we want for our productions. And they also tend to be really expensive. So save your money. Don't get a large diaphragm condenser microphone unless you're actually working in a recording studio. And in that case, they're great. But in the real world, in most of our homes, not the right choice. So what kind of microphone should you get? Well, let's talk about good, better, and best. And I'll start with the lowest end, good. This is a microphone that I think everybody should own, even if it's not your go-to mic. And that is a lavalier. Those are those little clip-on mics that you can put on your collar. It's about the size of a marble. And they're relatively close to your mouth. They're not exactly pointed right at you, so that's less than perfectly ideal. But they're super convenient. You can just clip them right onto your clothing, and now you have a mic nearby that does a pretty good job of picking up what you're saying. And it's super convenient if you want to do a video shoot on the go, because you can just clip that onto your shirt and talk to the camera and get a pretty decent sound pickup. If you're going to be using that mic outdoors, you might want a appropriate windscreen for it to block out wind noise. Another issue with those mics is that when you clip them onto your clothing, you need to be careful to attach them in such a way that the microphone itself doesn't rub too much against the clothing and bring in that shuffling noise into your recordings. But they're super convenient, and they're miles better than having a microphone attached to the camera. And I think it's something everybody should have. I have one that's made by Audio-Technica that cost about $40. So it's a pretty inexpensive solution. But it's not the best mic. The next step up would be a standard vocal microphone, or general purpose instrument microphone, the kind of microphone that your rock band down at the local bar might use. And there's a whole lot of microphones in this category, and generally speaking, I think just about any of them would probably work relatively well. So I'm talking about a dynamic, general purpose, or vocal microphone. An example of this would be a Shure SM57, which sells for about $100. And my general rule of thumb is that if you choose a microphone that's in the $100 to $150 range, maybe between $100 and $200 if you want to stretch a little bit, from a major manufacturer such as Shure, Electro-Voice, Audio-Technica, Sennheiser, Audix, company like that, you're probably going to be just fine. And I use the Shure SM57, which is a super popular, famous, general purpose instrument microphone. They're really rugged, they sound good, they work well, and they're not terribly expensive at about $100. And I think that that will work great for most people. If you want to step it up a little bit, look into a studio condenser microphone. Not a large diaphragm condenser, but a general purpose studio condenser microphone. Sometimes these are called pencil condenser microphones. And these can range widely in price from about $150 probably up to $1,000. Most of them are probably between $250 and $400. And they sound great. Being a condenser microphone, they tend to be a little bit more sensitive to surrounding noise, perhaps, but they produce recordings that are crystal clear. They have really good high-frequency response. And so they tend to give you a recording that's full-bodied, but maybe just a little bit more clear and crispy sounding than the other category of microphones, the dynamic microphones I just recently mentioned. But either of those choices would probably work great for most people. Now, in choosing a microphone, we have to choose what kind of connectors it has so we can interface it properly with whatever we're using to record our media. All of these professional level microphones are going to have 3-pin XLR connections on them. And so these are balanced connections. They'll give you the best performance and the lowest noise, and you can run long cables to the microphone without picking up noise and hum. But if you use a microphone like that, you need to interface it to whatever you're recording with that can accommodate that kind of connection. And so I would suggest looking at a recorder or an audio interface box in your computer that offers 3-pin balanced XLR Pro Sound type mic connections. Now, in the case of the lavalier mic that I have, it ends up in a 3.5 millimeter phone jack. It's the kind of little plug that you sometimes see on earbuds or headphones. It's probably the kind of plug that would go directly into your camera. And microphones that terminate in that sort of plug tend to be in the category of consumer or prosumer products. And so that's super convenient because I can take that microphone and I can go directly into my camera, done deal. And I don't need to do any sort of side processing with the audio or conversion of signals or anything like that. But if you see those kind of connections, that's an indication to me that this is not a professional level piece of equipment. Now, in the case of the lav mic, I'm okay with that. I use it for run and gun type stuff where I'm not necessarily reaching for the very best audio quality. I'm just looking for something that's pretty good. And lastly, you might find microphones that have a USB audio interface on them that you can plug directly into your computer. And if that kind of workflow works for you, that's probably okay. Those sorts of microphones I usually put into the consumer or prosumer arena, and I sometimes question if they're as good of microphones as you find in the professional level. Although I'm sure that there are examples of microphones that have USB interface that do sound good. And one final point is I'm talking about purchasing 3-pin XLR connector type microphones that are pro sound microphones from any of those major manufacturers. All of those manufacturers make terrific products, and most of them also make some low-end products that are intended for karaoke use or very budget-limited applications. Personally, I would avoid the products that are under about $100. Some of those really low-end microphones do take a sacrifice in sound quality. But once you're into a vocal microphone that's $100 or more, it's probably going to be a pretty good product. If you're looking at specific microphones, I'll put some links down below for some suggestions that would probably work well for you. The different microphones are certainly going to have slightly different characteristics in their tone quality, but the bottom line is that on any good microphone, you should sound like you. And so the differences in tone quality from one microphone to another should be pretty subtle. And like I say, any of those microphones from any of the major manufacturers will probably work well. But you do need an external microphone so you can get it placed in the right spot so it gets good sound pickup. And that's just something you're not going to do with the built-in mics and your camera. Hey, quick pause. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you're finding it informative and useful. If so, I would appreciate it if you'd take a quick moment and subscribe. That way you can get back to this channel easily in the future. If you're interested in learning more about any of the topics that I'm discussing here, check out the other videos on my channel, where I break down many of these subjects in more detail. In addition, you might take a look at the links down below this video in the description, where I link to various products that may help you elevate your production. So thanks for tuning in, and let's get back to the video. Tip number 2, put your microphone in the location where it's going to work well. And that is as close to your mouth as possible. Now ideally, we would put the microphone within a few inches of our mouth so it can pick up the sounds of our voice, which are going to be much louder than the sounds of the environment around us, and give us clean and clear vocals. Now, this might not be your ideal location for your video production. Maybe you don't want to see the mic in your video frame. So in that case, just put the microphone just outside a frame on one side or another, but still keeping it as close to you as possible. So to do that, you'll need a microphone stand. The other thing is that if you do use a microphone that's close to your voice and in frame, don't talk directly into the microphone. Now, when you see a rock and roll singer on stage, they're right up on top of the microphone, and they have to do that because they're in an environment that is so noisy around them that we need to get their vocals so loud into the microphone it overcomes all of that background noise. But that's not our situation right here. In our situation, it would be best to put the microphone a few inches from your mouth, but off to the side, so you're not speaking directly into it. And that's to prevent plosives. Plosives are those puffs of air that come out of our mouth when we say words that begin with the letter P, for example. So if you put your hand up in front of your mouth and say pickles, you'll probably feel a little puff of air come out of your mouth as you say that P sound. And those puffs of air, we don't want to hit the front of the microphone and distort the mic. And so if we put the microphone just off to the side a little bit, so we're not talking directly into it, but we're talking right by it, the microphone will get good pickup without getting distorted on those plosive sounds. if you're going to use a microphone for close talking, it's also a good idea to get a foam windscreen cover on it to also prevent those plosives from impacting the element inside of the microphone and creating distortion. While you're doing your recording, you're going to be watching the levels of the audio and the meters on your recorder. And we do not want those levels to ever exceed the top of the scale, which is probably marked 0 dB. That's the loudest sound that the recorder can record cleanly. If we exceed those levels, the recording will distort, and that's bad. On the other hand, if the levels are way too low, there's some electronic hum and noise always present, and that'll put our recording down too close to that, and you'll have noise in the background of your recordings. We don't want that. So what we want to do is to raise our recording levels up so that they are almost hitting the top, but not quite, and never hitting the top, hopefully. So adjust your recording levels so that the peaks are getting close to the top, maybe within a couple dB, and that will give you the lowest noise, best possible recording. Tip number 3. Pay attention to the space that you're in terms of its audio environment. When you choose a space to do a production in, before hitting that record button, take just a moment and listen to the background noise. Is the space quiet? Can you hear machinery or people in the background? You want to find a space where everything is as quiet as possible so that your video doesn't have all of that extraneous background noise in it. So just take a real quick moment to check out the space acoustically before settling on that location to do your video. Tip number 4, pay attention to your room acoustics. Now, you probably can't pay attention to your room acoustics because our ears and our brain automatically filter out the reflections in the room, so we don't hear rooms as they really are. You might want to do a quick test recording in a room to see how that recording sounds when played back. Because the sounds that occur in a room bounce around on the various hard surfaces, the walls, the ceiling, and so forth, and create echo. And like I mentioned, a lot of that echo is automatically filters out by our head, so we're not so aware of it, but it's really there. And so if you do a quick test recording in your space, and then listen carefully to that recording when played back, you'll get a better idea as to how that space truly and actually sounds. We've probably had the experience where we've recorded a business meeting or a college lecture, and it sounded fine while we were sitting there in the environment, but upon playing the recording back, it doesn't sound as good. And that, of course, is the case when recording in almost any standard real room if you're not in a properly treated recording studio. And so when you listen to your recording back, if it sounds a little more echoey, or you can hear the sound of the room in the recording, consider treating your room to make it sound better. And we generally treat the room by putting in acoustically absorbing material. So instead of the sound just hitting walls and bouncing back and forth, it hits the acoustical absorbing material and gets absorbed and doesn't bounce around the room, thus reducing the echoes in the room. And we can fix these rooms by putting up absorbing material. And that could be finding a room with carpet or putting rugs down. It could be putting up acoustical tiles, which are purpose-made acoustically absorbing tiles that you can stick on the wall. And that's probably the best solution. Of course, if you're going to do that, you need to cover a sizable amount of the surface area. If you have 500 square feet of wall surface that's reflecting sound, and you put up 1 square foot of acoustic absorbing material, well, you've still got 499 square feet of problem. But if you cover a quarter of that wall, a third of that wall, well, now you're going to make an impact on how that room behaves. You could also put up heavy curtains. The heavier, the better. You could put up moving blankets from moving companies, or places like U-Haul will sell these. And they're fairly inexpensive, and they're thick and heavy, and they do a pretty good job of absorbing sound, especially for the price. Well, like I mentioned, the best products are ones that are purpose-made acoustical panels. But curtains and moving blankets, soft furniture, rooms that have irregular shape will probably work better than rooms that are cubical or square. And so pay attention to the acoustics of the room to give you cleaner, more distinct sounding audio without the room echo in the background. Tip 5. Record your audio and video separately. Now this will make your workflow, your editing process, a little bit more complicated. But in my experience with most prosumer type cameras, they just don't have really pristine sounding audio. Whereas a separate audio recorder will allow you to capture really high quality audio. There's a number of portable recorders out there by people such as Zoom and Tascam. I'm a big fan of the Zoom F3 portable recorder. I think that works fantastic. You could also record your audio using your computer if you have a computer audio interface. The other thing is that most prosumer cameras will not accept a professional microphone input, XLR style 3-pin connector. And so by using an external audio recorder, it allows you to use professional microphones and capture really great audio. When you do use an external recorder, I would advise that you set your audio sample rate to 48 kilohertz. The 48 kilohertz sample rate is the industry standard sample rate for use with video, and that will help have the audio be properly synchronized with the video tracks when you import them into your editor when you go to edit your videos. Tip 6. Use a clicker to get your audio and video in sync. If you're recording your audio and your video on separate devices, we need to get these two tracks aligned in time so that the audio and the video track each other in sync in the final production. And the easy way to do this is you start your audio recorder, you start your video recorder, which also has a microphone on it, and then you use a clapper board. You may have seen these in old Hollywood movies where they say, "Take 7," and they go clack on the board. Well, that clack makes a really brief spike of impulse sound that can be seen on the audio waveforms coming off of the camera and its microphone and coming off of the other microphones in the separate recorders. And you can align that narrow spike easily inside of your audio editor to get your audio and your video in sync. And so, of course, we can do the same thing by using a clapper board just like they did back in the day. If you don't have a clapper board, you can just clap. Or what I prefer is just an automotive switch that has a good snap to it. So I just go on my video, and that creates the spikes in the waveform that are very narrow that make it easy for me to line up my video and my audio tracks and get them all perfectly in time in my editor. Now, if we were doing truly professional level production, a lot of that equipment offers digital timecode data. And so that would be an additional track on your audio recorder and an additional track on your video recorders that record digital timecode data that comes from a common clock. And so that clock is putting out exactly what time it is in digital format, and you're laying down the same track on all of your devices. And then when you import the various pieces of audio and video into your editing suite could read that digital timecode and automatically drop those things into the timeline in your editor where they belong in perfect time synchronization. But most of us who are working with prosumer level gear don't have the option of digital time coding. So we can use a clicker or a clapper to easily get the various pieces of our production in perfect time in our video editor. Tip 7. Cut the bass. If we look at the audio spectrum of human voices, they cover a certain range of low frequencies to high frequencies, and the human voice doesn't have a lot of energy in really high frequencies, and likewise it doesn't have much energy in really low frequencies either. Now, the really high end generally isn't a problem for us, but the low end can be. Now, there isn't any real useful program material when recording voices in the deep low end. However, lots of times in the space that we're in, there is energy down there that we don't really want to put into our production. It could be vibrations and a rumble from the building. It could be heating air conditioning systems moving some air around. Or maybe it could be some electrical interference putting a little bit of hum into the microphone. But none of these things we want in our production, and there isn't any energy in our voice that's down there that we need to save. So we can usually improve the sound of our productions if we cut out the super deep bass from our vocal microphones. Some microphones, particularly studio condenser type microphones, may have a little switch on the microphone to cut the deep bass. If you're using a portable recorder like a Zoom F3 or some of the Tascam units, there's likely an option in the menu to do a high-pass filter or a low-cut filter. And so if you have that option, it might be worth trying turning that on and setting up a filter at maybe 80 hertz or 120 hertz to drop the deep bass out. If you have a really deep baritone voice, you might want to lean towards an 80 hertz filter just so you make sure you don't step on any of the good content. On the other hand, if you have a little bit higher voice, you can probably get away with a filter at 100 or 120 hertz. But give that a try to see if you can knock out the unnecessary, unwanted, rumbly, deep bass that can come through and muddy up your recording. Tip 8. You want your audio in your video productions to come through loud and clear and consistent. And to do that, you can apply some audio processing during your editing. Now, I talked about a tool in a prior video called WinLoud that uses the FFmpeg utility to process your audio in one step that will increase the audio level right up to the very maximum it can be before distortion. It applies compression, which reduces the amount of distance between the quiet sounds and the loud sounds to increase the overall loudness just a little bit so your audio is always right up there, loud and clear and punchy. You can do the same kind of thing with independent tools inside of your editing suite. And this requires a little bit of care to get good effects without it being audible and annoying, which is why I suggest the WinLoud utility, because it does all of those things for you in a very effective yet transparent way with one click, and it will make your audio stand up loud and clear above the rest. And so either use a utility like that or do a little audio tweaking in your editing suite with compression to make sure that your levels are nice and loud and clear throughout your production. You want to have your audio output levels in your video to be approaching 0 dB, maybe peaking at -1 dB, so that your audio is clean and loud and clear and easy for your audience to hear. Tip number 9. Use music and sound effects in your videos sparingly. Sound effects and music can really add some spice and flavor to your videos, but you don't want those things to cover up your audio track. So in my opinion, if you're going to use effects like that, maybe you should keep them on the intro or the outro, but I don't think that you should have ongoing music playing over your dialogue. You don't want music to cover up what you're saying and make it harder for your audience to hear your message. Tip number 10, check your work. After you're done creating your video product, play it back and listen to it on headphones. And listen carefully to your audio track to make sure that it really sounds the way you want it to sound, that you don't have background noises, that you don't have shifts in level, that everything sounds good. If it sounds good in your headphones, then try playing that video back on other devices and make sure that it sounds good on everything you play it back with before posting that content. By following these tips, you can produce video content that has great audio quality that your audience will love. I hope this has been helpful and useful to you. And if it has, I would appreciate if you would take a moment and subscribe if you haven't already. I will put down links below to various pieces of equipment or various products that may help you elevate your production. Thanks for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you again soon on another upcoming video.